My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and I've been an obstetrician for more than 15 years here in New York City. I've delivered over 3,000 babies in hospitals across Manhattan, from the bustling corridors of Mount Sinai to the quiet delivery rooms of New York Presbyterian. I thought I had seen everything. Emergency C-sections at 3 o'clock in the morning. Premature births where tiny fingers barely wrapped around mine. Mothers who fought through pain that would break most people. All for that first cry that fills the room with life. My colleagues often said, "Sarah, you've been through it all." And honestly, I believed them. After 15 years of watching miracles happen every single day, I thought I had grown immune to surprise. I had protocols, procedures, years of training backing every decision I made. Medicine became my language, and logic became my compass. But that night, that night changed everything I thought I knew about life, about medicine, and about the thin line between what we can explain and what we simply have to accept. It was a Tuesday in October. I remember because the city had that crisp autumn feeling, leaves scattered across the streets of Manhattan like nature's confetti. I was working the night shift at Mount Sinai, and by 9:45 at night, the delivery ward had settled into its usual rhythm. The kind of quiet that makes you think the evening might actually be peaceful. That's when she walked in. Before I continue, tell me in the comments which city and country you're watching from. Stories like this one reach farther than you imagine. She was young, 27, though she looked even younger with her hair pulled back and those wide, nervous eyes that every first-time mother carries. Her husband walked beside her, one hand supporting her lower back, the other clutching a small overnight bag like it contained their entire future, which, in many ways, it did. I introduced myself as I always do, with a smile that I've perfected over the years, confident enough to inspire trust, gentle enough to offer comfort. "I'm Dr. Mitchell," I said, extending my hand. "I'm going to take care of you tonight." Her name was Emma Rodriguez. And the man beside her, whose hands shook slightly as he helped her into the wheelchair, was David. They had been married for 4 years, trying for a baby for 3 of those years. I could see it in their faces. The hope mixed with terror, the joy shadowed by the fear that something might go wrong. "Doctor," David whispered as we moved down the hallway toward the delivery room. "She's been having contractions since noon. They're getting stronger." I nodded, making mental notes. "That's normal for a first pregnancy. How far apart are they now?" "About 5 minutes," Emma managed to say between deep breaths. "Sometimes 4. As we entered the delivery room, I began my usual routine, checking vitals, reviewing her medical history, preparing for what I expected would be a long but routine first birth. Emma's pregnancy had been textbook perfect. No complications. All tests normal. Baby measuring exactly on schedule. At 39 weeks and 3 days, everything indicated a healthy, natural delivery. But as I attached the fetal monitor and heard that steady rhythm, lub-dub, 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 something in my chest tightened. Not because anything was wrong. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, maybe. In my experience, perfection in medicine often precedes the unexpected. "The baby's heartbeat sounds strong," I told them, and Emma's face lit up with relief. David squeezed her hand, and I could see tears forming in his eyes. "We've been waiting so long for this moment," Emma whispered. "We decorated the nursery 6 months ago. David painted little stars on the ceiling so the baby would always have something beautiful to look at." David laughed nervously. "She made me repaint them 3 times until they were just right. These are the moments that remind me why I became an obstetrician. Not for the medical complexity or the professional achievement, but for this, the raw, beautiful humanity of bringing life into the world, the hope that fills a room like sunlight, the love that makes everything else disappear." Emma's labor progressed normally through the early hours. Contractions came and went, each one bringing them closer to meeting their child. David never left her side, whispering encouragements when the pain peaked, making her laugh between contractions with stories about their dog, Benny, who had been acting strange for weeks, as if he somehow knew a baby was coming. At 2:15 in the afternoon, Emma was fully dilated. Everything was proceeding exactly as it should. The baby's heart rate remained steady, strong, reassuring. The room had that energy I've felt thousands of times before. Anticipation building toward the miraculous moment when a new person enters the world. "Okay, Emma," I said, positioning myself at the foot of the bed. "With the next contraction, I want you to push. Really push. Your baby is ready to meet you." She nodded, gripping David's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. The contraction came, and she pushed with everything she had. I could see the baby's head beginning to crown. Dark hair, perfect shape, exactly as it should be. "I can see the head," I announced, and Emma sobbed with joy. "One more big push, and we'll have shoulders." That's when I heard it. A change in the monitor. Subtle at first, just a slight irregularity in the rhythm that had been so steady for hours. I glanced at the screen, my trained eye automatically processing the numbers, the wave patterns, the data that tells the story of a baby's well-being. The heart rate was dropping. Not dramatically, not in the sharp, alarming way that sends teams running. Just a gentle decline that made my stomach tighten with the first whisper of concern. In my 15 years of experience, I had learned to trust these whispers. They usually meant something. "Emma, I need you to stop pushing for a moment," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Just breathe. Deep breaths." David's eyes found mine over Emma's head, and I saw the question there, the fear he was trying to keep hidden. I gave him the smallest nod, the kind that says I'm watching. Everything's okay for now, but I'm watching. But inside, that whisper of concern was growing louder, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this perfect delivery was about to become something else entirely. The monitor's beeping had changed from steady reassurance to something that made my pulse quicken. 140 beats per minute, then 135, then back up to 142. The baby's heart rate was becoming erratic, dancing up and down like it couldn't decide what rhythm to follow. "Doctor?" Emma's voice was small, scared. She could hear it too, the subtle change in the electronic heartbeat that had been her constant companion for the past 6 hours. "Is everything okay?" I moved closer to the monitor, my eyes scanning the readout with the intensity of someone reading a foreign language under pressure. 15 years of experience had taught me to read these patterns like sheet music, and right now, this particular song was hitting notes that made my chest tight. "The baby's heart rate is fluctuating a little," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. "It's not uncommon during delivery. Sometimes babies get a little stressed during the pushing phase." But even as I said the words, I knew this wasn't normal stress. This was something else. The pattern was too irregular, too unpredictable. In my years of practice, I had seen stressed babies. Their heart rates typically dropped during contractions and recovered between them. This was different. This was chaos. David stood up straighter, his hand never leaving Emma's. "What does that mean? What do we need to do?" "For now, we're going to try changing positions," I explained, helping Emma roll onto her left side. "Sometimes this helps improve blood flow to the baby." The position change did nothing. If anything, the heart rate became more erratic. 150, 128, 145. It was like the baby's heart couldn't find its rhythm, couldn't settle into the steady beat that meant safety. I called for my nurse, Maria, a woman who had worked labor and delivery for 23 years and had seen everything I had, maybe more. When she entered the room, her eyes immediately went to the monitor, and I saw her expression change. Just slightly. Just enough for me to know that she was seeing what I was seeing. "Let's get some oxygen going," I said quietly to Maria, and she nodded, moving efficiently to prepare the mask. To Emma and David, I explained, We're going to give you some extra oxygen. It'll help make sure the baby gets everything he needs." Emma's eyes filled with tears as Maria placed the oxygen mask over her nose and mouth. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" she whispered through the plastic. "I can feel it. Something's wrong with my baby." That's the thing about mothers. They know. Science can't explain it, monitors can't measure it, but mothers have an instinct that cuts through every medical explanation and goes straight to the truth. Emma knew, even before the numbers on the screen started telling their terrifying story. "We're being cautious," I said, which wasn't a lie, but wasn't the whole truth either. "Right now, I want to focus on getting your baby here safely." But the heart rate continued its frightening dance. 130, 120, 115. With each drop, my own heart rate seemed to climb. I had delivered babies with heart rate issues before. Usually, we could manage them with position changes, oxygen, maybe an episiotomy to speed delivery. But this felt different. This felt like something was fundamentally wrong. At 3:30 in the morning, Emma had been pushing for over an hour. The baby's head was visible, crowning beautifully, but every time she pushed, the heart rate dropped lower. And unlike normal deliveries where the rate recovered between contractions, this baby's heart seemed to be getting weaker with each effort. "I can see him," David whispered, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the top of his son's head. "Emma, I can see our son." But I could also see the numbers. 90 beats per minute, then 85, then a terrifying drop to 72. "Emma, I need you to stop pushing," I said, my voice more urgent now. "Just breathe. Don't push." "What's happening?" David's voice cracked. "Why can't she push? He's right there." Maria caught my eye, and I saw my own fear reflected there. 70 beats per minute was dangerous territory. 60 was critical. Below that, I didn't want to think about below that. I made the decision that every obstetrician dreads making. "We need to move to the OR," I said. "Now." The room exploded into controlled chaos. Maria called for the surgical team, while I explained to Emma and David that we needed to do an emergency C-section. Emma's face went white, her hands shaking as she gripped the oxygen mask. "Is he going to be okay?" she kept asking as we rushed down the hallway toward the operating room. "Please, Dr. Mitchell, tell me he's going to be okay." I wanted to give her the reassurance she desperately needed. I wanted to say yes. Everything would be fine. Babies face stress during delivery all the time. But the monitor was still beeping out that erratic, weakening rhythm, and I couldn't promise something I wasn't sure I could deliver. "We're going to do everything we can," I said instead, which felt inadequate but was the only honest answer I had. The operating room was brilliant with fluorescent light, everything sterile and precise and ready. As Emma was prepared for surgery, I scrubbed in with the mechanical efficiency that comes from years of training, but my mind was racing. The baby's heart rate was now hovering around 65 beats per minute. At this point, every second mattered. "How long since the last drop?" I asked Maria as I entered the OR. 2 minutes. It's been steady at 68. 68. Still dangerous but stable. Maybe we had caught it in time. Maybe the C-section would solve whatever was causing the distress. Maybe this would be another one of those close calls that makes a good story later, when everyone is safe and healthy and home. But as I made the first incision, as my hands moved through the familiar steps of bringing a baby into the world through surgery instead of the birth canal, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were racing against something bigger than time. The uterus was right there. The baby was right there. Just a few more minutes, and Emma and David would meet their son. I had no way of knowing that those few minutes would stretch into the longest, most impossible moments of my entire career. The scalpel moved through tissue with surgical precision, each layer revealing what should have been the straightforward path to bringing Emma's son into the world. But as I worked, the monitor continued its ominous countdown. 65 beats per minute. 62. 60. "Talk to me about fetal heart rate," I said to Maria. though I could see the numbers myself. Sometimes, in moments of high stress, hearing the information spoken aloud helps the mind process what the eyes are seeing. 58 and dropping, Maria replied, her voice steady but tight. BP is stable. Oxygen saturation is good. 58. That number sat in my chest like a stone. In all my years of practice, I had seen babies recover from heart rates in the 60s. The 50s were different territory. The 50s meant we were running out of time. I could hear David outside the OR, his voice muffled through the walls but still audible. He was on the phone with someone. Probably Emma's mother, maybe his own parents, trying to explain what was happening while not really understanding it himself. "They're doing a C-section," he kept saying. "The doctor says the baby is stressed. I don't know. I don't know what that means exactly." Emma lay on the operating table, conscious but sedated, her eyes searching my face for answers I wasn't ready to give. "Can you hear his heartbeat?" she whispered. "Is it getting stronger?" The monitor answered for me, 55 beats per minute. I reached the uterus and made the careful incision that would bring their son into the world. This was always the moment of truth in a C-section, the moment when you could finally see what had been hidden, when you could address directly whatever was causing the problem. But what I saw made my blood run cold. The umbilical cord was wrapped around the baby's neck, not once, but twice, tightly. So tightly that it had been cutting off blood flow with every contraction, with every movement. This wasn't just cord compression. This was near strangulation. "Nuchal cord ×2, I announced to the surgical team, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Tight." I reached in carefully, supporting the baby's head while trying to slip my finger under the cord. Sometimes you can unloop it easily. Sometimes the cord has enough slack to lift over the baby's head. But as I worked, I realized this wasn't going to be one of those times. The cord was wrapped too tightly, pulled too snug. 52 beats per minute. "I need to cut the cord," I said, reaching for the scissors. "It's not ideal. You prefer to deliver the baby with the cord intact, to clamp and cut it properly after birth. But sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you have to make the call that prioritizes life over protocol." I slipped the scissors carefully between the cord and the baby's neck, feeling for the right position. One wrong move could injure the baby, but leaving the cord wrapped could be fatal. "Heart rate is 50, Maria called out. My hands were steady as I made the cut, but inside, everything was shaking. 50 beats per minute. We were in the danger zone now, that gray area where seconds could mean the difference between a healthy baby and a tragedy. The cord released, and I quickly delivered the baby's head and shoulders. He was blue. Not the healthy pink of a newborn taking his first breath, but the grayish blue that means not enough oxygen has been reaching vital organs. "Come on, little guy," I whispered, though I'm not sure if I said it out loud or just thought it. I cleared his airway, stimulated his chest, did everything in my power to encourage that first breath. Nothing. The room fell into a silence that was deafening, despite the beeping machines, the quiet conversations of the surgical team, the distant sounds of the hospital beyond these walls. It was the kind of silence that swallows everything else, the kind that makes you hyper-aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing. "Heart rate?" I asked, though I could see the monitor myself. 48, Maria said quietly, and dropping. 48 beats per minute. I had never delivered a baby with a heart rate that low who had survived without significant complications. The textbooks were clear. Below 50 beats per minute for an extended period usually meant brain damage, if the baby survived at all. I held Emma and David's son in my hands, their miracle, their hope, their future, and he wasn't breathing. "Dr. Mitchell." Emma's voice was small and scared. "Why isn't he crying? Why can't I hear him crying?" I moved quickly to the warming table, beginning the resuscitation protocol that every obstetrician hopes they'll never need to use. Bag, mask ventilation, chest compressions. the careful, methodical process of trying to restart a life that seemed to be slipping away. What's happening? David had somehow gotten into the OR, his surgical gown hastily thrown over his street clothes. Why isn't he crying? Sarah, why isn't our baby crying? 36 beats per minute. The NICU team arrived. 3 specialists who deal with the most fragile, most critical newborns. They took over the resuscitation while I stood back, my hands shaking now that they weren't busy saving a life. I had done everything right. The surgery had been textbook perfect. The cord had been cut at exactly the right moment. But sometimes, even when you do everything right, it's not enough. 28 beats per minute. How long has he been without adequate oxygen? Dr. Peterson, the NICU attending, asked me. I looked at the clock. It had been 6 minutes since delivery. 6 minutes of resuscitation attempts. 6 minutes of a heart rate that kept dropping despite everything we were doing. Intermittent drops for the past 2 hours during labor, I replied. Severe bradycardia for the last 10 minutes. Dr. Peterson nodded grimly. 10 minutes of severe oxygen deprivation. Even if we got the baby back, even if we could restart his heart and get him breathing, the chances of him being neurologically intact were 22 beats per minute. Emma was crying now, her sobs echoing through the OR despite the sedation. Please, she kept saying, please don't let him die. Please. David had gone completely silent, standing at the foot of the warming table where his son lay motionless, surrounded by machines and specialists who were running out of options. I looked at the clock again. 7 minutes. 8. 9. At 10 minutes, Dr. Peterson looked up at me, and I saw in his eyes what I already knew. What everyone in that room knew, but nobody wanted to say. We were losing him. 18 beats per minute. The number glowed on the monitor like an accusation. In 15 years of delivering babies, I had never seen a heart rate that low in a newborn who survived. 18 beats per minute wasn't life. It was the echo of life, fading away despite everything we were doing. Doctor. Peterson continued chest compressions, his hands moving with mechanical precision on the tiny chest that seemed too small, too fragile to withstand what we were putting it through. The NICU nurses worked around him, adjusting tubes, checking medications, their movements efficient, but increasingly desperate. 11 minutes, someone called out. 11 minutes since delivery. 11 minutes since this baby had taken a breath on his own. I looked at Emma, whose face was streaked with tears, despite the sedation. Her lips moved in what might have been prayer, might have been pleas, might have been the simple repetition of her son's name. They had chosen Gabriel, a name that meant God's messenger. Right now, I wondered what message this little Gabriel was supposed to bring into the world. David stood frozen beside the warming table, his hand hovering over his son's body as if he wanted to touch him, but was afraid of interfering with the medical team. He's so small, he whispered. He's so small, and he's not moving. 15 beats per minute. Dr. Peterson looked at the clock, then at me. In his eyes, I saw the same calculation I was making in my own mind. At some point, continued resuscitation becomes cruel rather than hopeful. At some point, you have to acknowledge that medicine has limits, that not every story has the ending we desperately want. Sarah, he said quietly, using my first name instead of my title, the way doctors talk to each other when they're about to make the hardest decisions of their careers. We're at 12 minutes. 12 minutes. The unspoken question hung in the air between us. How much longer do we continue? How much longer do we put this family through the agony of watching their son's life slip away despite everything we're doing? I looked at the monitor. 12 beats per minute now. The line was becoming flatter with each passing second, each heartbeat weaker than the last. His color isn't improving, one of the NICU nurses said softly. Gabriel's skin remained that grayish blue that meant his organs weren't getting the oxygen they needed. His tiny fingers, which should have been grasping reflexively at the world around him, lay still and pale. Emma's sobs filled the silence between the mechanical sounds of the machines. "Please don't stop," she whispered, though I wasn't sure if she was talking to us or to God or to her son himself. "Please don't give up on him." 13 minutes, Doctor. Peterson's compressions continued, but I could see the futility settling over his face. We had given Gabriel every medication, tried every intervention. The umbilical cord had been wrapped so tightly around his neck that the damage might have been too severe, might have happened too long before we could intervene. 8 beats per minute. The monitor's beeping had become slow and irregular, like a clock winding down. In the space between each beat, the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next one, hoping for the next one, dreading the moment when there wouldn't be a next one. "Maybe we should," Dr. Peterson started to say, but he couldn't finish the sentence. How do you tell parents that their baby, their longed-for, deeply wanted baby, isn't going to make it? How do you find the words to say that sometimes medicine fails, sometimes hope isn't enough, sometimes miracles don't happen? 5 beats per minute. I moved closer to the warming table, looking down at Gabriel's face. He looked peaceful, almost like he was sleeping. His features were perfect. David's nose, Emma's chin, the kind of baby face that promises a lifetime of goodness and joy and love. But his chest wasn't moving. His tiny heart was barely beating. And I knew that in another minute, maybe 2, that beautiful face would be still forever. 14 minutes, someone announced. David's hand finally came to rest on his son's leg, the gentlest touch imaginable. "Gabriel," he whispered. "We're here, son. Mommy and Daddy are here." 3 beats per minute. The room had grown quiet, except for Emma's crying and the increasingly erratic beeping of the monitor. The NICU team continued their work, but I could sense the shift in energy, the gradual acceptance that we had done everything humanly possible. Dr. Peterson looked at me again, and this time the question in his eyes was clear. "It's time, isn't it?" I glanced at the clock. 14 minutes and 30 seconds. In medical school, they teach you that after 15 minutes without adequate oxygen, brain damage is almost certain. After 20 minutes, survival is nearly impossible. We were approaching that threshold where continuing resuscitation becomes an exercise in prolonging agony rather than preserving life. 2 beats per minute. The monitor's beeping had become so slow that each sound felt like a surprise. Beat. Long silence. Beat. Longer silence. Gabriel's heart was giving up, and there was nothing more we could do to convince it otherwise. "Dr. Mitchell," Dr. Peterson said softly. It wasn't really a question anymore. I took a deep breath, preparing to make the decision that no doctor ever wants to make. Preparing to tell Emma and David that we had fought as hard as we could, but that their son's injuries were too severe, the damage too extensive. 1 beat per minute. "Emma," I said, moving to her side, taking her hand in mine. "David." As my voice was gentle but steady, the voice I had learned to use when delivering impossible news. "We've done everything we can. Gabriel has been without adequate oxygen for too long. His heart is..." That's when it happened. The monitor, which had been barely registering a heartbeat, suddenly erupted in a sound that made everyone in the room freeze. Not the slow, dying beep we had been hearing, but something stronger. Something impossible. The heartbeat wasn't fading. It was getting stronger. 20 beats per minute, then 30, then 50, and then, I swear I will remember this sound until the day I die. Gabriel took a breath. Not the weak, gasping breath of a baby struggling to survive, but a deep, powerful inhalation that filled his tiny lungs and turned his grayish skin pink before our eyes. And then he cried. Oh God, how he cried. It wasn't the weak, fragile cry of a baby struggling to breathe. It wasn't the uncertain whimper of a newborn finding his voice. This was the powerful, demanding, absolutely furious cry of life itself. Life that refused to be extinguished. Life that had somehow found its way back from the very edge of darkness. The sound filled the operating room like thunder, so unexpected and so strong that everyone froze for a moment, unsure if what they were hearing was real. The NICU team, who had been preparing to stop resuscitation, stood with their hands suspended in midair. Dr. Peterson, whose face had been etched with the resignation of defeat, looked up with an expression I had never seen before. Wonder mixed with disbelief, mixed with something that might have been fear. "What?" he started to say, but Gabriel's cries drowned out his words. The monitor that had been barely registering a heartbeat was now showing numbers that made my knees weak. 70 beats per minute, then 80, then 90. Within 30 seconds, Gabriel's heart rate had climbed from nearly flatline to completely normal. His oxygen saturation, which had been dangerously low, was rising rapidly. But it was his color that made me believe I was witnessing something impossible. The grayish-blue skin that had marked him as a baby in severe distress transformed before our eyes, pink flooding his tiny body like sunrise breaking over a dark landscape. His fingers, which had been pale and still, were now moving, grasping at the air with the reflexive strength that every healthy newborn possesses. "My God," whispered one of the NICU nurses. "What just happened?" Emma's sobs had changed from grief to something I couldn't identify. Relief so profound it sounded almost like pain. Is that my baby crying?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Is he okay? Is Gabriel okay?" I moved to the warming table where Gabriel lay, very much alive, very much angry about whatever had just happened to him. His cries were so strong, so persistent, that I had to raise my voice to be heard over them. "His heart rate is 110, I announced to the room, though everyone could see the monitor displaying numbers that shouldn't have been possible. "Oxygen saturation is 98%. Color is excellent. Respirations are strong and regular." Dr. Peterson stepped back from the warming table, his hands shaking slightly. "In 25 years of neonatal intensive care," he told me later, he had never seen anything like it. A baby doesn't go from nearly flatlined to completely normal in 30 seconds. A baby doesn't recover from 14 minutes of inadequate oxygen without consequences. A baby doesn't come back from the edge of death and immediately start crying like nothing had happened. But Gabriel had done exactly that. "Can I hold him?" Emma asked, tears streaming down her face. "Please, can I hold my son?" I looked at Dr. Peterson, who was still staring at Gabriel with an expression that might have been professional confusion or might have been awe. He nodded slowly. "All his vitals are stable," he said, his voice careful and measured. "Heart rate, breathing, color, everything looks normal, more than normal. It looks perfect." I lifted Gabriel from the warming table, and he immediately calmed in my arms, his cries settling into the soft sounds that healthy newborns make when they're content. His eyes opened, and I found myself looking into the clearest, most alert gaze I had ever seen in a baby who had just been born. Most newborns take time to focus, to really see the world around them. Gabriel was looking at me like he had been waiting to meet me, like he had something important to tell me. "Here's your son," I said, placing him gently on Emma's chest. "Here's your Gabriel." The moment Gabriel touched his mother's skin, something shifted in the room. The clinical atmosphere of the operating room, with its bright lights and sterile surfaces and electronic monitoring, suddenly felt sacred. Emma's hands came up to cradle her son, and David leaned over both of them, his tears falling onto Gabriel's perfect pink skin. "He's so warm," Emma whispered, marveling. "He's so warm, and he's breathing, and he's here." David was sobbing openly now, his hand resting on Gabriel's tiny back. "I thought we lost him," he said through his tears. "I thought our baby was gone." "We all did," I said quietly. and it was the truth. For those final minutes, when Gabriel's heart rate had dropped to almost nothing, when his skin had been blue and still, when 14 minutes of resuscitation had failed to bring him back, we had all accepted that we were about to witness a tragedy. Instead, we had witnessed something I still can't explain. Gabriel settled into his mother's arms like he belonged there, like the past 15 minutes of crisis had been nothing more than a brief detour on his journey into the world. His breathing was steady and strong. His heart rate remained perfectly normal. His color was the healthy pink of a baby who had never experienced a moment of distress. "Dr. Mitchell," Dr. Peterson called me aside, his voice low. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I nodded, still watching Gabriel snuggled against Emma's chest. "In all your years of practice," he continued, "have you ever seen anything like that?" I thought about his question seriously. In 15 years of delivering babies, I had seen remarkable recoveries. I had seen babies who surprised everyone with their resilience, their ability to overcome complications that should have been devastating. I had seen premature infants who defied every medical prediction, babies who survived against impossible odds. But I had never seen a baby come back from clinical death with no apparent consequences. I had never seen a heart rate climb from 3 beats per minute to over 100 in less than a minute. I had never seen a baby who had been without adequate oxygen for 14 minutes wake up crying and healthy and perfect. "No," I said finally. "I've never seen anything like that." Dr. Peterson nodded slowly. "Neither have I, and I've been doing this for 25 years. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Gabriel with his parents. The crisis was over. The emergency had passed. According to every monitor in the room, Gabriel was now a completely healthy, normal newborn baby. But both Dr. Peterson and I knew that what we had just witnessed wasn't normal at all. It was impossible. And yet, there Gabriel was, proving that sometimes impossible things happen anyway. The hours that followed Gabriel's birth felt suspended in time, like we were all existing in a space between the medical world I knew and something else entirely. Something that didn't fit into any textbook or training manual I had ever studied. Gabriel remained perfect. Not just healthy, but perfect in a way that defied every logical explanation. His neurological responses were exactly what you'd expect from a baby who had experienced no trauma at all. He nursed immediately and vigorously. His reflexes were strong and appropriate. When the pediatric neurologist came to examine him 12 hours after birth, standard protocol for any baby who had experienced oxygen deprivation, she found absolutely nothing wrong. "Are you sure this is the baby who was resuscitated for 14 minutes? Dr. Sarah Chen asked me, looking over Gabriel's chart with a confused expression. "Because everything I'm seeing suggests a completely normal, healthy newborn." "That's him," I confirmed, watching Gabriel sleep peacefully in Emma's arms. "That's our miracle baby." Dr. Chen shook her head slowly. "In my 20 years of pediatric neurology, babies who experience that level of oxygen deprivation don't just bounce back like this. There should be signs. Poor muscle tone, feeding difficulties, abnormal reflexes, something. But this baby..." She gestured toward Gabriel, who chose that exact moment to open his eyes and look directly at her, as if he was following the conversation. "This baby shows no signs of having experienced any trauma at all." That was the beginning of my transformation. As a doctor, I had always prided myself on being able to explain things. Medicine is built on cause and effect, on understanding the mechanics of the human body, on being able to predict outcomes based on symptoms and treatments. For 15 years, that approach had served me well. I could look at a patient's condition and give their family reasonable expectations about what to expect. But Gabriel changed that for me. Over the next 3 days, as Emma and David prepared to take their son home, I found myself returning to their room again and again, not because Gabriel needed medical attention, he didn't, but because I needed to understand what I had witnessed. I needed to find the scientific explanation for what had happened in that operating room. Dr. Mitchell, Emma said on their last day in the hospital, I want to thank you for not giving up on him. I sat down in the chair beside her bed, Gabriel sleeping contentedly in her arms. Emma, I have to be honest with you. For a few moments there, I thought we had lost him. Medically speaking, we should have lost him. David nodded, his hand resting on his wife's shoulder. We know. We could see it in everyone's faces. But something incredible happened, didn't it? Yes, I said simply. Something incredible happened. Emma looked down at Gabriel, her expression soft with wonder. The night before I went into labor, I had the strangest dream. I dreamed that Gabriel was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't understand what it was. And then, right before I woke up, I heard this voice. I don't know if it was his voice or someone else's. And it said, some things are stronger than medicine. Some things are stronger than fear. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. I didn't know what it meant then, but I think I do now. That conversation stayed with me long after Emma, David, and Gabriel went home to begin their life as a family. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about what Emma had said. Some things are stronger than medicine. Some things are stronger than fear. I had spent my entire career believing that medicine was the strongest force I could wield against suffering, against loss, against the fragility of human life. And medicine is incredibly powerful. I've seen it save countless lives, heal countless injuries, give hope to countless families. But Gabriel had shown me something else. He had shown me that sometimes life itself has a power that goes beyond what we can measure or predict or explain. Sometimes, the will to exist, the determination to breathe, the refusal to surrender, can overcome odds that should be insurmountable. 3 months later, I received a photo in my office mail. It showed Gabriel sitting up in his high chair, his face covered in what appeared to be mashed sweet potatoes, grinning at the camera with the kind of joy that only babies possess. On the back, Emma had written, Dr. Mitchell, Gabriel is thriving. Thank you for being there when the impossible became possible. With love, the Rodriguez family. I kept that photo on my desk, and it changed how I practice medicine. Don't misunderstand me. I didn't abandon science or evidence-based treatment. I didn't start believing that miracles could substitute for proper medical care. But I did start approaching each case with a deeper sense of humility, a recognition that medicine is a partnership between human knowledge and something larger than ourselves. I started talking to my patients differently, acknowledging both the statistical realities of their conditions and the possibility that statistics don't always tell the whole story. I started being more comfortable with uncertainty, more willing to admit when I didn't have all the answers. Most importantly, I started believing that every birth, every life, carries within it the potential for the impossible. 6 months after Gabriel's birth, I received another note from Emma. This time, it came with a video. In it, Gabriel was laughing. Not just the reflexive laughter of a baby, but the deep, joyful laughter of someone who genuinely finds the world delightful. David was making funny faces at him, and Gabriel was responding with sounds that were almost like he was trying to laugh back. Dr. Mitchell, Emma's voice said over the video, we wanted you to see how happy he is. We wanted you to know that whatever happened that night, it wasn't just about saving Gabriel's life. It was about showing all of us that some things can't be explained, only experienced. Some things can't be measured, only felt. And some things belong not only to science, but to life and faith. Those words, some things belong not only to science, but to life and faith, became my personal motto. I had them engraved on a small plaque that I keep in my office, right next to Gabriel's photo. A year later, when Gabriel took his first steps, Emma sent me another video. He walked straight to the camera, his little hands reaching out like he was trying to touch whoever was watching. At the end of the video, he looked directly into the lens and clapped his hands once, as if he was saying, "Look what I can do." I cried watching that video, remembering the blue, still baby who had lain on the warming table for 14 minutes with barely a heartbeat, remembering how close we had come to losing him, remembering the moment when everything changed, when the impossible became reality. Today, Gabriel is a healthy, thriving 3-year-old. According to Emma's most recent update, he loves books, especially ones about doctors and hospitals. He tells everyone he meets that he wants to help people when he grows up. His favorite game is playing with a toy stethoscope, listening to his stuffed animals' heartbeats, and declaring them all perfectly healthy. Sometimes Emma brings him by the hospital to visit. When he sees me, he runs straight into my arms and gives me the kind of hug that reminds me why I became a doctor in the first place. Not for the science, though I love the science. Not for the prestige, though I'm proud of what I do. I became a doctor because I believe in life. I believe in the strength of the human spirit. I believe in the power of hope, even when, especially when, hope seems impossible. Gabriel taught me that medicine is most powerful, not when it has all the answers, but when it creates space for questions we never thought to ask, when it opens our hearts to possibilities we never thought to imagine, when it reminds us that every heartbeat is a miracle we too often take for granted. That night in the operating room, when Gabriel's heart rate dropped to nearly nothing and then somehow found its way back to life, everyone present was changed. We had witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible. We had been part of a story that had no medical explanation. And in that inexplicable moment, we had been reminded of something profound: that life is stronger than our fears, more resilient than our worst expectations, and more mysterious than our deepest understanding. Some things belong not only to science, but to life and faith. If this story touched you, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. You're not alone in believing that sometimes impossible things happen anyway. And sometimes that's exactly when we need them most.